Welcome to the Pooch Parenting Podcast, a podcast for parents with dogs. I'm Michelle Stern, a certified professional dog trainer, mom, and former teacher. Living with kids and dogs at the same time can feel like a circus. I know because I lived it too. Join us as we interview a variety of experts and parents to discuss topics that will make parenting with dogs easier, safer, and less chaotic. Also, you can love living with your dog again. I'll always keep it real, which might even mean that you hear the messiness of life in the background on occasion, but at least you know you're not alone. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about a common question that I hear from parents, which is, at what age, or if at all, kids should ever be allowed to walk the dog solo? It's every parent's dream to sort of hand off some of the dog tasks to our kids because that can make our lives easier. And we are so used to having to take on most of the responsibility of parenting on our own. But in reality, sometimes it would really help us out if we could delegate and say, hey, can you take care of the dog? But we need to think about the risk assessment of asking our kids or allowing our kids who are begging us for the privilege of walking the family dog. So before I dive in with some of my thoughts on this, I want to start with a little story. I was walking in my neighborhood the other day with my small dog, and I noticed a young, probably preteen girl coming out of her little cul-de-sac with her Labradoodle on leash and her phone in her hand, and she was not watching her dog at all. She was on her phone and she was focusing on the phone, and the dog was doing whatever it wanted on the other end of that leash, including pulling her around. And it really made me think about the risks associated with inattentive people on the other end of that leash. Because if we're not paying attention, or if our kids are not paying attention to what the dog is doing, that can lead to all sorts of challenges. So for example, if a person with a reactive dog was approaching this girl, she would not have even noticed that it was coming, and that could have put her dog in a really uncomfortable situation. Alternatively, her dog could have eyed a squirrel, which we have lots of squirrels in our neighborhood, and the dog could have dashed towards the road, and the girl may not have been able to stop herself from being pulled into the street. So she could have let go of the leash, which would have allowed the dog to possibly get hit by a car if the squirrel were to dash into a busy road, or it could have led the girl to be hit by a car if she were to be dragged into the street. It's really hard to coach our kids about how to react in that type of situation because we want our kids to be safe, but they don't always have the developmental capacity to make good choices in that split second. So it's really common for kids to be pulled around when they are walking a dog. So how do we handle this? I mean, this girl was being a normal preteen, right? She was on her phone. She was happy to probably be out of the house where her parents might not be nagging her of things to do, and she's theoretically helping out, right? But the dog's needs may not have been met because the girl wasn't paying any attention to the dog, or the girl or the dog could have been in danger. So how do we decide what is appropriate, if we should let our kids walk our dogs, whether or not we think they're helping us or not? So a few things to think about. When children walk dogs, we have to think about the distance at which kids are willing to go or are capable of going. And for many kids, that's just around the block. And we need to think about whether or not that's even worth it to the dog. Because for a dog to be satisfied on a walk, we need to think about their mental enrichment on that walk, their physical exercise on that walk, and for some people who live in an apartment or in a condo where they don't have a yard they can let the dog out, obviously there's a potty component to the walk as well, where some dogs sometimes just need to get out multiple times a day just to do their business. And possibly the walk may not be for anything else. So we need to really look at what the dog is getting out of the walk when our kids are the ones taking the other end of the leash. Is it worth it? Is it helpful to us, to the dog, to the child? So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is obviously safety. We need to make sure that our children are safe. If our dog runs towards another really big dog, are our kids going to be pulled along? Will they be dragged? Will they fall on the ground? So that's something to think about. And will our dogs be safe? Because our kids cannot always make appropriate decisions in the split second when they may be necessary. So what I often encourage families to do when they have young kids who are just so excited to participate and help out is we walk together as a family. The adult attaches a second leash to the dog. Sometimes we clip it to the main leash so that if the child pulls on it or yanks, we're not punishing the dog in any way. Or sometimes we'll add it to a secondary ring on the dog's harness where the child isn't really in control, but they feel really special for holding a second leash. And what that allows us to do is we are the responsible person. So if the dog were to start running towards the street, for example, then we have the lead, the main lead, and we can prevent anyone from falling down or being injured. But it also gives our child the opportunity to start practicing things like leash handling skills, because it can be really hard to hold a leash, to figure out what to do with the slack of that leash, to figure out how to hold it so it doesn't pull on our bones or our wrists or anything else that's dangerous. That's a learned skill. And so we can model that for our kids by showing them how we're holding it. We can show them how to hold it. We can practice letting the leash run through our hands so that we give our dog extra space if they get excited about sniffing in a bush. We talk about how to shorten it safely so that we can bring them closer to us when we're passing, let's say, a stroller or another dog. So these are all skills that we need to learn and we need to model for our kids. And I love that some kids get so excited to help out with the dog and be helpers. And I don't want to quash that or by any means tell you that you should never do that. But I do think that your participation as an adult who is capable of multitasking and making split decisions that can affect everyone's safety really should be present in that situation. And I think back to that preteen girl who I saw recently, and I just think that, the dog may be able to potty on a walk with her, but I'm not really sure everyone's needs are truly being met, except for maybe hers, because she gets time outside the house on her phone. So in terms of age of children who can handle this, I really think that we need to look at kids who are older than 10 to 12 for taking the lead on their own. Even then, developmentally, their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until they're after 25, really. Yet we are allowing kids who are 16 years old to drive cars. So obviously a 16-year-old should hopefully be able to walk your dog. I know that's a lot older than you would wish me to say. Again, all of this will be based on your child's developmental stage, as well as your dog's behavior history, your dog's developmental stage. Adolescent dogs, for example, are much more difficult to walk than a small puppy or a senior dog who may just want to go slow and hang out. But again, I would consider kids who are between 10 and 12 to be getting close to the age where they might be able to do a small walk on their own. But again, that wouldn't be adequate for your dog's outing if that was all of the time they got outside in terms of exercise or mental stimulation. So I may not be giving you the news you want to hear. You can't just hand your leash off to your kiddos and say, hey, I love that you want to be a participant in raising our dog. Here you go, have a good walk. There are too many factors like squirrels and cars and other reactive dogs that come into play that can impact the emotional and physical experience, as well as whether or not it's even worth it for your dog from a mental enrichment and physical exercise standpoint. We want our kids to have a successful experience, and we want our dogs to have a successful experience. So I would encourage you to try the double leash strategy. It works great for a lot of families. It'll help you assess whether or not your kids are ready to make good choices and help keep everyone safe. I hope you found this helpful. Take care. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Pooch Parenting Podcast on the podcast app of your choice. For ongoing support, get on the waitlist for the Pooch Parenting Society, where I share training tips, activities, and coaching so families with dogs can live in harmony. By signing up at safekidsanddogs.com, you'll be the first to know when I open registration again for new members.